Hello guys, what's up? In this video we are going to learn about SSH, which is a way of establishing communication and managing remote machines from your local machine. Okay, we can establish this kind of connection without a password. Instead, we can use a key, right? And besides that, all the communication is encrypted, which is a good thing. So now we are going to see a little diagram of what we are going to do right now. Okay, on one side we have our local machine, which is Windows, and on DigitalOcean it's a web service. We are going to create one or more Linux machines or servers, if you will. Then we will be able to establish a connection from the Windows local machine to the Linux machine. Okay, and once the connection is established, we will be able to transfer files back and forth, okay, from Windows to Linux and from Linux to Windows. I will use Windows as a local machine for a particular reason, okay. Many people suggest that you use the software called Putty for Windows, but as it turns out, it's not necessary. Actually, it's easier if you don't use Putty, okay? So we are going to see that in a minute. Now a little bit about the SSH key itself, okay? It's composed of two files, two separate parts. The names are self-explanatory, but the public part is the one that you will share with the machine that you will connect to, okay? So the public part goes to the machine that you will try to establish a connection, and we have a private part as well. The private part is supposed to be on your machine only, okay? It's not intended to be shared or even seen by anybody else, so keep that in mind. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into DigitalOcean. Okay, so to create a new machine on DigitalOcean, it's pretty straightforward. We go to create droplets. We pick a distro. Let's use Ubuntu, CPU shared plan, regular, the most basic configuration. Okay. We can use SSH keys or password. We are going to establish an SSH manually, so for the moment let's pick password. Okay, let's create a random password. Let's say let's see if this one works. Okay, it's good. We pick a name. Let's call it Ubuntu 1. And that's it. Create droplet. Okay, now we have a Linux machine on DigitalOcean created and ready to be used. Okay, so step one is copy the IP address. Now we go to our terminal on the Windows machine. This is my local Windows machine. Okay, I'll be using PowerShell, and the command is SSH the user on that machine. Okay, the initial default user would be root, but we will be changing that in a while. So root at the IP address. Okay, and that's it. Now I'm being prompted for a weird message. Okay, this is important to know. Every time we connect to a new machine, a piece of information of that machine, or as they call it, a fingerprint, will be saved on the local machine, the machine that will establish a connection. Okay, so this happens only the first time. Okay, but it's important to know. So I will hit yes. I'll be prompted for the password. which is this one. Okay, and that's it. We are connected. The first important thing to know about this machine, let me clear this. If we we have this folder here, .ssh. It starts with a dot because it's a hidden folder. So if we cd into that folder, we have this file called authorized keys. Let's see its contents. It's empty, right? This file, authorized keys, will be responsible for holding all the public keys for all the computers that are authorized to SSH into that Linux machine. Okay, so in order for us to establish a connection from the Windows local machine to that Linux machine, we have to first create a key on the Windows machine, grab the public part of that key and paste it inside this file. Okay, so this is what we are going to do right now. So let's open a new terminal. Just to be clear, right? This is the Windows local machine and this is the Ubuntu, the Linux machine on DigitalOcean. Okay, so if we cd into, let's see this. Alright, these are some helper files, some scripts. If you want to use them, there is a link in the description of this video where you can download this project. Alright, so if you want to know more details about the scripts, I highly suggest that you read this README file. Okay, so we have this add key. Okay, let's see its content. Nano add key. Basically, it will prompt the user for a key name, generate a key, and add this key. You'll have to customize the path, which is where the key will be saved. Okay, so let's use it. Okay, now let's add a new key. I'll be prompt for a name. Let's call it Windows. Now I'm being prompted for a passphrase. It's not a password. It's similar, but it's not the same thing. It's highly recommended that you create a passphrase for your keys, but this time I'll leave it empty. Okay. The key is created. If you want to see the key, you can go to Home, SSH. This is the directory where all the keys will live. Okay, so this is the key we just created. This is the private part and this is the public part. Okay, you can get the private part. As I was saying, do not share this with anyone. And now we have the public part. Okay, this is the part that you will copy and paste inside the authorized keys in the Linux machine. Alright, so let's copy. If we echo Ctrl V, now we have the public key. Okay, so echo the key, authorized keys. Alright, so if we now cat authorized keys, it's here, right? This is the public key inside the authorized keys file. Now we are able to establish a connection, an SSH connection without a password, right? And for that, SSH the key. Okay, it's important to specify the key, which is Windows, the name of the key, root at and that's it. Now we just establish an SSH connection without the need of a password. Okay, now let's talk about something very important. Okay, there is a lot of safety concerns in establishing connections, remote connections to a Linux machine as the root user. Okay, as you may know, the root user is like a god mode on Linux, so you can do pretty nasty things by being the root user. So what we are going to do is create a new user, and from now on we will be connecting only as the new user, not as a root anymore. Okay, so that's why we have this file here. Okay, add create user. Okay, and now we will send this file to the Linux machine. Let me go back to the main folder. Okay, so to transfer files from the Windows local machine to the Linux machine, it's scp the file create user, the user root at the server, the IP address, colon. Now what goes after the colon is the directory where I want the file, this file, to be saved. Okay, so if I don't type anything, it will go to the initial folder, which is this one. So I'm being prompted for a password because I didn't specify the file, the key file. Okay, it's on home SSH Windows. Okay, so just a recap: scp -i, the private key, okay, space the file that I want to transfer, the user at IP address, and colon. Now it worked. We have a new confirmation that the file was transferred, and to prove, here it is. Okay, create user. Let's call him Lorenzo. Password. And that's it. Now we have a new user under the name of Lorenzo. So I can exit. I'm back to root. Okay. Exit again. Now if I try to SSH as Lorenzo, it works. All right. Let us see. And I'm being prompted for a password. Again, I forgot to mention the key file. SSH Windows, and it works. All right. As I was saying, I don't want to connect as the root user anymore. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, we need to edit a specific file. So you can sudo, this is the file, etc sshd config. I'm being prompted for a password because this file requires root permission. Wrong password. Sudo nano. Okay, there are some very interesting things to change in this file. Okay, permit root login. I'll set this to no. Alright, for the moment that's the only change that we will make on this file. So exit, change, yes, save, yes. Now, because we just changed this file, we need a new command. systemctl restart sshd. Okay, we are running this command just because we changed this file. All right. Password. Now, if I exit, let's try to connect as root. Okay. Instead of Lorenzo, let's try root again. Now I'm being prompted for a password, right? So if I have the password, I can still log in as a root. I don't want that. I don't want anyone trying to brute force a password and try to connect as root. I don't want that. So let's log in as Lorenzo again. So we are going to make a new change on that same file we just saw. So nano sudo nano etc ssh sshd config. All right, that's the file. So we have password authentication, yes, no, and save, yes, save. Now systemctl restart sshd, right? Password. Okay, now let's exit. Now let's try to connect again as the root user. Okay. Now we are not even being prompted for a password. Okay. So from now on, either you try to connect as a valid user, or you don't connect at all. So that's the plan. No passwords allowed anymore. Only SSH keys. Okay. Well, as it turns out, it's very inconvenient to always type this every time I want to connect to a remote machine. Okay, so if you want to connect to one machine, that's okay. But if you have many, that becomes very hard to manage. Alright, so that's why we have this file here, this config file. So let's see its contents. Nano config. So here's how it works. We create host and an alias, right? We customize an alias. Host name is the IP address. Port 22 is the default one, but if you want to change that port, you will go to that config file you just saw. Okay, there you can set a new port if you want to. User is the user, and identifier is the private key. Okay. Now we are going to make a copy of this file and save it to our SSH folder. So copy config file, config to home SSH. Alright, so let's nano home SSH config. Let's custom name, let's call it ubu1. ubu1 host name. This is the host name. I mean the IP address. Host name is the IP address. Port user Lorenzo, and identifier is the private file, the private key. And if you have multiple machines, as you may have guessed, you will include them here. You can add as many as you want. And that's it. Just a recap, right? Host, a custom name, an alias, host name, the IP address, port, default to 22, the username, and the private key. All right, and save. Yes, please. Okay, now if I want to establish a connection, instead of typing this whole thing here, I can just SSH ubu1. That's it. Far more convenient, right? We already saw how to transfer files from the local machine to the Linux machine. Now we are going to do the opposite, right? Let's create a file here. Let's call it hello. Alright, it's here. I will send this file from Linux to the local Windows machine. So, alright, the command is scp ubu1, right, which is the server, colon. Now, the location where the file is stored on the server machine. It's on the root folder, the initial folder. So I can just type the name of the file. Hello txt space, and now the location of the file on the local machine. In other words, where I want the file to be saved. I want it to be saved here, where we are, in this folder, right? So I can just type period. That's it. Here is a file. So we just transferred hello txt from Linux to the local Windows machine. Now we are going to use the Linux machine to serve a website, okay? To accomplish that, we can use Apache. So let's install it. Sudo this is the command. There's one thing I forgot to do is every time update. Every time you create a new server, it's recommended to run sudo apt update. Now let's see what happens if we try to visit our Linux machine as if it was a website. So we just copy the IP address, paste it, and look, we have a website. This is the page that Apache provides as a default page. Our job now is find this file on the Linux machine and replace it with our desired files. So this is the location of that file. Here it is. That's the web page we just saw. On the Windows local machine, we have these files. This is actually my personal portfolio, right? We are going to make these files arrive here, okay? We already know how to do that, but instead of sending all the files one by one, I will make a zip file, compress all the files in the current directory, portfolio, zip. Here it is. Okay. Now we can scp portfolio ubu1 colon and that directory, right? I want it to be saved here. Okay. Well, it does not work because it requires sudo permission. So instead of sending here, I'll send it to the initial folder, right? Let's see if it works. Yeah, apparently it did. So let's go back to home, and here it is, right? So now I can sudo move portfolio to var sudo password. Okay, apparently it has been moved. So let's cd, there it is, right? Let me clear this out. Let me delete this index file. I need to be root. Sudo remove index. Let me clear this. Alright, now we can sudo unzip. We need to install unzip. Okay. Now we can sudo unzip portfolio. Yep. Okay. Now we can sudo remove portfolio. Alright, I guess we are all set. Let us just refresh this page. Here it is. Now we have a custom website being served on the Linux machine. Okay, now we are going to see how to use an Android phone to SSH into the Linux machine. So step one is install this app on your phone. All right. Here's the app. So we're going to create a new connection and address. Address is the IP address. All right. Identity, new identity. The username is the username on the Linux machine. Okay, we will set a private key. Okay, now if I try to connect, it will not work because we need to send the private key, the public key from this phone to the Linux machine, right? So identities, export public key. Okay, I will use my email for that. Okay, now that we have a public key generated on the Android device, I can echo paste it. Yeah, okay. This is the public key for the Android device. I sent it via email, right? So I can echo this into SSH authorized keys, right? So if I cat SSH authorized keys, now we have two keys, right? The first one for the Windows machine, and now a new one for the Android device. Okay. Now we can go back to the app and try to connect. And it works. And to prove that, let's create a new file, touch yes txt. Let's see if that file arrives at the Linux machine. Here it is. And that's it, guys. I hope this video covers all the basic regarding communicating to remote machines using SSH keys. And see you next time. Bye.